Killing's the easy bit. It's getting rid of the body that's the problem.
That's going to be the key to this.
Yes.
Were there any warning signs? Were there any reports? Because you remember in the London case, there were.
Yeah.
That individual had been reported for indecent exposure a few days before he killed a girl, and they'll be looking for this in Alan Greer. And they're going to have to answer for why this man, the warrant was for a serious matter. It was not a trivial thing. It was for a serious matter. What investigations, what inquiries were done in order to track down Harrison Simpson before this, because it might have saved that wee lassie's life. The main weapon in my armoury was charm. Charm. And
it wasn't much of an armoury then, Tom. That's all I've
still got it, Simon. I've still got it.
Mr. Tom Wood, how are you? Not spoken for such a long time. Welcome to the new season of Crime Time Inc.
Thanks very much, Simon, and welcome home. Welcome home from the United States of America, where you've been helping Jano. What's his name? The president of FIFA?
I've got nothing to do with FIFA whatsoever.
What's he called? What's he called? Fantini? What's he?
That's Johnny Tartan.
Listen, that's got your finger. That's got your dabs all over it. Simon, you can't tell me you were not involved in that deal somewhere. When I saw that, I thought that's a scam. I thought, Simon McLean, wait a minute. Here's the thing. So you've got this big football tournament, right? And you've got Fantini there, and you've got this dodgy deal being hatched, and you just so happen to be in the same neck of the woods exactly, and there's no connection. Come on, Simon. Come on.
It's all circumstantial.
Come on.
All circumstantial. Tom, we used to have a thing in the Post. Obviously, the figures are a wee bit out of date now, but we used to say to each other, imagine doing that for £100 or £200 or whatever the job was. It would need to be £1 million. If it was life-changing, £1 million, you might consider it. Well, Infantini had me at 4.5 billion.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's what you stand to lose too, because apparently he was on a salary of $5 million, I assume, per annum, plus the use of a private jet and all the rest of it. Yeah. I mean, what an Egypt. What?
He had a chance to be pals with Donald.
Well, you're judged by the company you keep.
So definitely a crime worth discussing there, Tom, although it's all sub judice at the moment. But I think it's all going to come out in the wash. And for the benefit, I normally say for the benefit of the listeners across the pond, our listeners, Crime Time Inc. listeners across America, which is growing all the time. But in this case, they'll be very familiar with it because it was probably their president that was party to it. I don't think it's any coincidence either that those two were sitting at every game watching the football. Now we know what they were really doing, passing bits of paper back and forward to each other. So just to recap it a wee bit, FIFA are the world leaders. They lead the world with all the countries and 6 continents, all the countries, and they're the governing body for that. And it obviously encompasses the World Cup, which is the biggest sporting event in the world. And what I found really interesting here was that Infantini, he said, well, we're going to make 4.5 billion from this sell-off, selling off the interest of the World Cup and letting outside companies come in and get a share of the proceeds and help promote it and all the rest of it. I then discovered that FIFA have got over 10 billion in the bank already. So the 4.5 billion was neither here nor there. And then you discover that Donald Trump's, one of his in-laws' brothers is going to be head of the company that's going to do all this. And it will all seem to be signed, sealed and delivered without anybody knowing anything about it. And it's going to be voted on in September. That's what he came out with last week. And of course, we've seen the ramifications of that because first UEFA came out straight away, which are one of the biggest parts of FIFA, all the 55 European countries, and said, no, we've voted 55-0 against this. And now we've got them backpedaling like maddies, like Michael Jackson going backwards here, trying to say, well, let's have a wee think about it. So certainly worth consideration, Tom, 4.5 billion. But I must be honest, nobody offered to cut me in.
Well, you know what? An old pal of mine at the CID used to say it smells like a box of old fish. It really does. It really does. And you know what struck me about it, and I think about it, is, do you know, when you think about the origins of football and where it all came from, and what our clubs back in the 1870s, 1880s, what they were formed to do.
Yeah.
They were formed to do good work. They were formed to encourage young men, all young men at that time, but now young women, to take part in wholesome exercise and competition and working in teams that could not have been a nobler cause, really, than, you know, setting up the game of football. And yet somebody's always got to get their hands in it and turn it into a scam. But Simon, I've got to say, I'll have some forensic work done, but you were over at the World Cup, and in one of the photo shots of a group of old men sitting, there was Donald Trump and there was Infantino. I'm sure I saw your wee face there sitting at the back.
Yeah.
You know,
I may have been the barman or something.
Selling the program.
Yeah.
Seriously, you've been in the United States for another extended break at the expense of Crime Time Inc.
Well, I wish that was true.
And what was your observations? I mean, it seemed to me that, notwithstanding what we've just been discussing, the way the tournament was run was excellent.
Yeah. The part I saw of it, of course, in Boston and a wee bit in Florida, what I must say is that it was well policed, because the Scottish fans are different, as you and I know, and the Tartan Army, as they're called. It was interesting, Tom, because I was there. We were there from the Monday prior to the Haiti game on the Saturday. So when we arrived, there was only really a small amount of Scots in the hotel and whatnot and in the city. But every day that got more and more. And as it built up towards the weekend, I think it was the Thursday we were going through the park. Have you been in Boston?
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful city. Real historical city too. You would love it.
Oh, yeah.
And we were going through the park, a beautiful day, and I met the police. They were briefing, and they all had their bikes and a few horses. And I spoke to one of the commanders there, and I said to him, I hope you remind them that their sense of humour is the most important thing they're going to require this weekend. And 2 or 3 heard me, and we had a bit of banter back and forward. They were well ready for the Scots, because that's what it needed. It didn't need policed. It needed they needed a shepherd back and forward from the pubs and whatnot.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Irish, of course, in Boston.
Yes.
I mean, it's a very Irish city, so there's a lot of connections there.
Yes.
So I was always hopeful it would go well.
Yeah.
And the travelling support, the Scottish travelling support, has been excellent. You know, the national team support has been excellent for a long number of years, and absolutely dedicated people who spend huge sums of money.
Yeah.
Simon, their own money.
Yes.
Their own money. Not Crime Time Inc.'s money, their own money to go to these things.
And of course, the
great credit.
The cone on the head of every statue and anything at all that they could put a cone on quickly became their trademark all over the city. But the police helped with that too, and the local authorities, stewards and whatnot. At one point, they brought in a cherry picker to help them put a cone up on top of a particularly high statue. So it was all done in good spirit and good faith. And there'll be lots that comes from that. But the serious part of it, Tom, is that it's the power of football. And I've just watched the end of the Commonwealth Games. It's really the power of sport to bring people together. The Commonwealth Games are a great example of that through here in Glasgow for the last 2 weeks. And every week I talk about it on my Talk and Walk and Football programme, about the power of football in particular. And tomorrow you're going to come into my live radio show and talk about that very topic.
Right? It's live, is it, Simon? You're listening. You're taking a big risk. Put me on live live radio. You're taking a big risk, Simon. Are you sure? Are you sure? You don't have the deft hand of our editor, Chris, to
tidy it up.
You know, stroke out little things I've said, personal insults I've laid at your door. Yeah. Listen, I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to it. Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. I've got some things to say, Simon. Let me tell you.
The thing to finish on the FIFA thing, Tom, He was brought in to replace a very, very famous leader of FIFA, who's a household name, Sepp Blatter. And the corruption that was going on there for so long now, and it was the Americans, you've alluded to this on here in Crime Time Inc. before, that it took the American, the FBI, to go after him, to smash that whole operation. Because there's a good example of it today. The African nations are saying, well, we support him, because he promised them £30 million each for their votes. And that's the kind of problem that we had, is that votes can be bought. And when you've got 10 billion in the bank, that's a lot of power.
That's right. I mean, the Sepp Blatter thing, we discussed it. We did on Sepp Blatter and on FIFA and on the role. To me, the weakness of the European system and the strength of the FBI, who can go after racketeering.
Yes.
And they did. And they brought Sepp Blatter down. And Fantini came in as a new broom, but it's the old maxim, Simon, that power corrupts.
Yes.
And total power corrupts totally.
Yeah. Now, that brings me to the fact that you were Deputy Chief Constable of Lothian and Borders. Are you speaking from experience here, Tom?
What about power?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
We could explore that a bit then.
Well, if you feel able for it, Simon, go ahead. Go ahead. I've told you. The main weapon in my armory was charm. Charm. And and
it wasn't much of an armory then, Tom. That's all I can say.
I've still got it, Simon. I've still got it. As you will find out tomorrow on live radio.
I think one of the main, seriously, there's a lot of police officers listen to this, and they'd all be fascinated about how you get up the ranks to the lofty heights of Deputy Chief. And I think that charm isn't really an attribute for that. I think self-delusion is part of it, for sure.
Well, you can't self-delude yourself into a senior position. If you could, you'd have done it. No, I think people used to say to me, "Oh, what's your career plan?" I never had a career plan. I just enjoyed every job I did, and I just did the very best I could in every job I did, and I like working and I like researching, and I was just born to. My parents were both people who just took great pleasure in working and being involved in stuff, and that was the same.
Yeah.
So it was, and of course I was lucky. You've got to be lucky.
Right place, right time to some degree, Tom.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And I worked with the right people.
Yes.
I was very, very fortunate that I had some great bosses in my early days who taught me the right ways to do things, and I learned a huge amount from them, particularly the CID. Very, very important to get good bosses. If you get bad bosses, then it's a disaster. It really is. So there was that, and so you just But I mean, in terms of the people who had a big plan about where they were going to end up, usually fell flat in their face because events come along and smash you sideways and knock you down. So it's just one foot in front of the other, as I still do.
Good, Tom. Tom, I'm sure we'll come back to the FIFA stuff because it's going to be ongoing for some time now. And the World Cup comes round every 4 years. And we've got the European Championships over here in 2 years' time as well. So we've got so much because we've got a new season here. We're going to be doing regular updates with the news, but we've got a bit of catching up to do because there's so much been going on. I seem to say that to you all the time on here. There's so much in the news. So we have to be quite choosy, really. But one that we had both focused on for obvious reasons is because it's a Scottish case, and it was this PC Alan Greer, a Police Scotland officer who was arrested in April this year, and that was after an investigation into an allegation of rape that dated back to 2012. He was released pending further inquiries and obviously suspended from duty. And then he was found dead in May of this year. And police said that there were no suspicious circumstances, and it now seems that he committed suicide. But his death has been investigated by the Police Investigations and Review Commissioner because it followed police contact. I'll come back to you on that. I just want to finish the wee summary here. The subsequent anti-corruption unit investigation has identified multiple alleged victims over a period of about 14 years. So that takes us back to 2012. And the police are saying that those allegations include rape, other serious sexual offences, and attempt murder. Further victims are obviously still possibly going to be identified. So let me come back to that Police Investigations and Review Commissioner. Who's that?
Yep. PIRC. PIRC is the Police Investigation Review Commissioner was appointed, it must be about 10 years ago now, they started up with PIRC. And PIRC is a sort of an independent, almost like an ombudsman.
Right.
Like an ombudsman, that's what it's like. And various people have been appointed, mostly senior legal figures or people with a background in the law.
Right.
And it's like an independent view. So if the deputy designate, the Deputy Chief Constable of Police Scotland, who is responsible for discipline, and that was my old role in Lothian and Borders Police, will on some occasions will say, I'll tell you what, let's just get an independent view on this, and they will give it to the PIRC office. And I think PIRC is quite small. They've got a number of investigators working for them, but it's nothing too big. It's not. They don't reinvestigate things. They overview and they look at investigations that Police Scotland have done and just make sure, just put an overview of fairness and probity over it. And it's a kind of like a safety belt, really. And sometimes, you know, if you're doing a big investigation, it's very handy. I mean, during some of the big cases I had, we put together a wee panel of independent people, you know, an ex-head of CID here, an ex-forensic expert there, just to look at what they've done so they could say, well, this is all very well and good, but have you thought about A, B, and C? And it's very healthy, that, and it's very useful. And I venture to suggest, dear Simon, that had that been done in the Emma Caldwell case, the case that the public inquiry is ongoing just now, she was a sex worker who was killed, and her killer was overlooked, despite the fact that the police were informed, sometimes by existing officers, of his, you know, his worth as a suspect. The independent overview is a healthy thing. It's like an inspection. You can see it in two ways. You can see it as a threat, or you can see it as an opportunity.
Is this something that we lost, Tom, when we created Police Scotland? Because prior to that, in our day, we had different forces in Scotland. And I remember that someone from another force would come in, like someone from Lothian and Borders would come in, totally impartial, with no prior knowledge of the investigation, maybe bring his own team or create a team, as you say. Were you involved in that, where you would go to Dundee or you would go to Aberdeen or you would come to Glasgow to do that kind of thing? And have we lost that now? Is that why we need PIRC?
Yes, that's one of the reasons, Simon. You're right, we have lost that. Because we used to do that. And quite frequently, I mean, I called on Strathclyde. One of our firearms unit shot a woman through here, and I called on a Strathclyde chief superintendent to come and do an investigation. Did a very, very thorough investigation into it. I've done that on several occasions. I myself have gone on behalf of Strathclyde, actually, to take statements in a particularly sensitive case and report right back. I was a detective super at the time. Report back to your deputy chief constable, because he wanted a clean pair of hands. He didn't want and so yes, and that's something that has been lost, of course, because it's all one force now. So it's very difficult to do that, and so that's why PIRC comes in. But what's interesting about the Greer case is that the independent review is being done by the National Police Chiefs Council. Now that's in our day that was called ACPO, Association of Chief Police Officers. It's called the National Police Chiefs Council now. Now that's interesting, because I've never heard of that body, who are a representative body, taking on an actual hands-on investigation. But I suspect it's because a lot of forces are now very wary about taking on these independent investigations, especially in cases which are very controversial. Because all you do is you're putting yourself in the firing line. And so a lot of chief constables, on getting a phone call saying, look, could you send a team of people up? They're saying, look, I'm really sorry, we don't have the resources, we're fully committed, which of course is probably true as well. But they want to stay out of other people's mess.
What do you mean by the firing line, Tom? What do you mean by that? The media? The courts?
Well, activists, things. I mean, in the Greer case, regardless of how thorough the investigation is, there will still be a harping back to the Metropolitan case of the officer who murdered the girl. Do you remember that? In fact, when I watched the sort of BBC expose of this, which was not the best, but when I watched that, there was very clear reference. They were connecting these cases, and they were also inferring that Police Scotland had not conducted themselves properly in that they had not detected this earlier.
Right.
Yeah, and that's going to be the key to this. Were there any warning signs? Were there any reports? Because you remember in the London case, there were.
Yeah.
That individual had been reported for indecent exposure a few days before he killed the girl, etc., etc. And they'll be looking for this in Alan Greer. Were there any signs? What does his supervisors say on their staff appraisals? Were there any indications about his behaviour towards women in the police service? Because a couple of things that have come out is that he was a public order instructor.
Is this Wayne Couzens?
Yes, I'm talking about Wayne Couzens in London. Yes, I'm talking about Wayne Couzens. There's a couple of things coming in Alan Greer. They're talking about how he was involved in public order training and he was taking inappropriate photographs of some of the women officers during the public order training. So was any of this made known to the authorities? Was any of this made known? Was this reported at all? Because if it was, and no action was taken, then there's very serious consequences from that.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to hear a lot more, and people will, the enemies of the police service, and there are enemies of the police service, will take the opportunity to make the very most of this. And so I just hope that there were no warning signs. You know, I do. I hope that that's the case.
Tom,
we'll have to see.
Just on that topic, I see what you mean. And again, we can't go too deeply because it's an ongoing inquiry and those inquiries are being made just now. So we don't want to preempt anything like that. But thinking from a personal point of view, I'd like to think that if I worked with this guy, I would have known that he wasn't right. I would have seen the warning signs. He must have been I don't know anything about him, but he was on a shift. He must have been either in an office or on the street or wherever he was, control room. He must have had colleagues. He must have been trained. He must have had a sergeant. And I did work with some strange folk over the years, as you did. But there's a thing I say to people sometimes about walking football, actually, that the badgings don't stay. If they don't like the rules, if they don't like the vibe of people helping each other and enjoying their company, then they tend to get spat out. And I say that about the police as well. Tully Allen, our first training at Tully Allen, I would say between 15 and 20% didn't make it, maybe the first 2 weeks, because they just weren't cut out for it. They couldn't take the discipline. They couldn't take what's required to be a police officer. I'd like to think that this guy would have been spotted sooner. If we get a problem calling each other out or calling out these bad apples.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's true. Yes, I know you would like to think that, and I would have liked to think that if Alan Greer had been working for me, I'd have spotted him. But that's wisdom in hindsight. We know what we know now, and let's find out and see what's happening. I mean, we can talk about this because it's not sub judice because Alan Greer is dead. So we can talk about it. But I think these things can be very, very damaging for the reputation of the police service. And every man and woman working in the police service is tarred by that brush, just like the Metropolitan Police have been tarred by the Wayne Couzens thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's wait and see. But what I did think was that the media side of it was managed very well.
Yeah.
Obviously, what happened was the BBC reporter, Mark Daly, he's an investigative reporter, he obviously got wind of it and started making inquiries. And rather than be defensive, Police Scotland were obviously waiting for an opportunity to say, yes, that's right, and this is what we've done. And they put up an assistant chief constable to talk about it, and they made it very clear that they were turning over all stones. In fact, they had very, very quickly, when they realised the extent of this man's activity, they had very, very quickly passed it over from the professional standards team to a major investigation team. So it's a full murder squad that have got this investigation now. Yeah. So it'll be on homes and it'll be done properly. I suppose the thing is, we've got to recognise that sometimes a bad apple who goes undetected can really cause the most enormous damage. And we've had examples of that in the United States, where a serving police officer or police officer was in fact a serial killer, the Golden State Killer. And there's an excellent series on that on our old friends, Small Town Dicks, Paul Holes, who was an investigator on that, is speaking about it. And it's a good. It's once you've finished listening to Crime Time Inc. Only when you've finished listening to Crime Time Inc. you can dabble in Small Town Dicks, and that's a good thing. But that was a shocker, and sometimes that's the definition of hiding in plain sight, isn't it?
And Tom, you and I have come across, and everyone listening to this has said to themselves, that guy, the retired minister, the backbone of the community, or whatever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. We've all had cases of people leading double lives, and that sometimes can be police officers, but it can be any occupation where they run their own business or go to work every day, have got a family, or ostensibly happily married, etc., etc. And what's going on in their other life sometimes would stand your hair on end.
Well, that's right. I mean, you and I have both been involved in murder investigations into sex workers, and that's really where you find these things. Yeah. And that's where you come across them, not once, not twice, but you come across them dozens of times.
So moving on, one that's it's still breaking news, really, because I'm led to believe that a 26-year-old has been arrested in the last 24 hours. This was a Scottish victim, Elizabeth Jane Ross, known as Lisa, I think, from the Edinburgh area. I think she was about 38 years of age, and her body was found in Athens in a suitcase in an abandoned building in Athens on the 18th of July. And that's a 26-year-old Afghan national that's been arrested. Greek police said that he's admitted disposing of her body. That doesn't mean he's admitted to killing her, of course, and reports differ on whether he's admitted that or not. We'll find out in due course. But it's right up your street, this one, Tom, because of your mantra. Killing's the easy bit. It's getting rid of the body that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And this fella, first of all, it's a tragedy because Elizabeth Jane Ross, an Edinburgh lady, or connections in Edinburgh lady, was one of these people who devoted her life to helping other people. And she went all over the world. She was a Christian lady, and she went all over the world trying to help other people. And she went to the most desperate of places, trying to give comfort, trying to provide food. And it was part of her Christian mission. Yeah. And it just shows you, when I read about her background, it's almost like a sort of a 19th century thing, but these people still now place themselves in the most enormous danger trying to help other people. And of course, they're tremendously exposed in that circumstance. A woman travelling alone, going out to Greece, getting in tow with all sorts of people, living rough. You don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know what you're dealing with. And she's obviously fallen victim to this man. And I think from what I can gather, he was actually seen. He's well known, although he's a vacant, he's quite well known in the area. And he's actually seen on some CCTV or other, actually with the suitcase with the body in it. So I don't think there's much doubt that he had possession of the body. I noted with interest that he's been charged so far with manslaughter. Now, that could be an anomaly of the Greek system, and I'm not familiar with that. Though he's not been charged with murder. I don't think he's been charged yet. I
think the way it works is they now put him to court, and that's when he's charged.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, the piece I read said he'd been charged with manslaughter and assault, and when he was arrested, he had possession of weapons as well.
There's talk about the body, the woman's body not having any visible cause of death, and it might be suffocation. It might have been the act of putting her in the suitcase that killed her.
Well, it could be, but of course that's one of the problems if you can't find the cause of death. Yes. I mean that's always been a difficulty for us, hasn't it? You know, how do you prove a homicide if you can't find a cause of death? But it's a particularly tragic story, and the photographs of her, she looks a very pleasant lady, and hats off to the tremendous courage and dedication of these people who devote their lives to giving help to others in war zones and in places like that where they have no protection and where they're exposed to enormous danger. And this Elizabeth Jane Ross's life has been forfeit because of that.
Tom, moving away from that murder in particular, talk us through the crime scene then. If you came, I'm putting you on the spot a wee bit here, but I think our listeners will be interested because it's an unusual circumstance that a body is found in a case. It was another vagrant that found it, apparently, and called the police. Talk us through your initial response and your priorities at that crime scene.
Well, funnily enough, I mean, bodies in suitcases or dumped in canals and it's not altogether uncommon. You're actually better that than bodies or body parts lying out in the open, because if a body is contained within a suitcase or any other object inside a house or the boot of a car, the trunk of a car or a suitcase, at least you have contained. You have a potential for forensic evidence from the case itself. And also the body hopefully has not been exposed to the weather and to animals and things like that. So again, forensic evidence is preserved.
Yes.
I mean, your first temptation when you come across this is to open the case and see what's inside, see who's inside, and try and identify them and get going. And there are three kinds actually of murder investigations when you think about it. The usual ones are when you turn up, there's a body and you know exactly who's done it because it's a domestic and the person's waiting there. And the other one, which is also common, is the one where it's a very short sprint, where 24 hours, you're in hot pursuit, you've got a suspect in mind, it's a case of finding them, and again, you know, most murders that we investigated or are investigated now are cleared up within 24 to 48 hours. And then you get the third kind that requires very, very careful handling. And I describe these as being the ones that require quiet persistence. And the Caroline Hogg, Susan Maxwell murders are like that. The World's End murders were like that you've got to take it very, very carefully so that you do not destroy or damage any evidence that you come across. And not all murder squad detectives, not all SIOs are actually best suited to all of these three things. Anybody who's led a murder squad can do the first two. It takes another skill set to do the third, the quiet persistence one. We take it very, very carefully. Now, what would happen if say, that suitcase was recovered in the UK, in Scotland? That suitcase, once determined that the human remains were inside and that person was dead, that's very important. That person was dead, but in this case, the body parts would be decomposed. There'd be no question about that. The whole suitcase would be taken to the mortuary and opened and examined in a very, very meticulous, slow way, so that everything was put in place and so that nothing was missed. And it would all be videoed, and there would be an audio of it, and there would be a commentary from the pathologist, along with the senior investigating officer, about what they were doing and what was found. And before that, the outside of the suitcase would be subject of a complete forensic examination. Yep. So it would be fingerprinted, it would be examined by lasers for any kind of marks, it would be swabbed, everything would be done in that quiet persistence. That's how we describe it.
Something I wanted to ask you there, Tom. You mentioned the 3 types of inquiry that we're very, very familiar with. The third one being the whodunit, if you like. In every case, someone's lost their life, and there's a locus, and there's an accused, whether he's standing there or whether, but he's still got to go to court, or they've still got to go to court and be convicted of it. Is the forensic job and the scene at the locus exactly the same, regardless of that type, whether it's type 1, 2, or 3?
Yes, because you can't assume that it's going to be over in 24 hours, and therefore you can take shortcuts. That way lies disaster. Yeah. Because the truth of the matter is, you might think, when you arrive at the locus of the scene and you see the body, you might think, well, it's going to be the boyfriend, or it's going to be another gang member, or this is a drugs job, or whatever. You might think that, but if you take a shortcut and you miss something in that initial hour or 2 or 3 hours, or in that forensic examination, you can never go back. So you've got to assume, when you go to one of these scenes, you've got to assume that it's actually the long, slow job, and make sure that you go through all the motions so you don't trip yourself up.
Yeah, because it's got to be a case at court at the end of the day as well, and the court don't have 3 categories. The court want the best evidence every time, and that's what we need to supply.
No, that's right. And you can make a fool of something, you can miss something, you can contaminate something. And now the identification process and the forensic process is so sensitive that, I mean, that's a tremendous advantage for the investigator, but it's also a tremendous threat too, because the defence, remember, in the case, also have access to expert witnesses. And so, if things have to be done immaculately and thoroughly, it's even easier to make a mess of it.
Because the defence can then say at court, well, was this done? No. And you've left a gap there, you've left a loophole there, you've left a possibility for other scenarios to keep in.
Yeah. And all you need, remember, is reasonable doubt. If you've got reasonable doubt, or you can try and suggest reasonable doubt about any element of the case at all, then the case will fall. And the judge will direct the jury. It's got to be beyond reasonable doubt.
Good, Tom. Thanks for doing that for us. And it's good that you mentioned The World's End, Caroline Hogg, Susan Maxwell, because these are all previous episodes. We've now got over 300 episodes of Crime Time Inc., and there's a whole catalogue there on whatever platform people are listening to. I tend to go in and listen to old ones now and again, because they're not really old, because most of the cases we talk about or most of our experience and the inquiries that you dealt with as a senior investigating officer in charge go back decades. So they'll never get old. They're history, that's what they are.
And they've got common threads, Simon. They've got common threads running through them. And some of the lessons drawn from these cases, and I particularly am keen to emphasise, what lessons did we learn? What was about this case? Why did we do this? Why did we do that? What lessons for the future? And it's one of the great tragedies of growing old is that you watch these mistakes recurring time and again. Yeah. And for instance, I have been watching with absolute horror the case of the murder of little Isabel Welsh, who was 2 years old, and it's an English case. It's nothing to do with Scotland. She was murdered after ages of her brief. She was only 2 years old, and there's video pictures of this bright wee 2-year-old jumping about, just full of life, and just a lovely, bonny wee girl. And she was murdered by her mother and by a man called Harrison Simpson. Coming out now is the information. It's Cleveland police who are dealing with it. Coming out now is the information that Harrison Simpson had an outstanding warrant for him for harassment of a woman. So it was an allied kind of offence. He had a warrant outstanding from a court warrant for arrest for something like 18 months to 2 years. And it sent shivers up my spine, because there were always two things that you could really trip up over that were dangerous. One was missing persons, and the other was outstanding warrants, particularly petition warrants. And I say petition warrants because, I mean, petition, if you're on petition, that's for a serious charge in Scotland. And we're talking about from a higher court. And one of the things, if you're a good sergeant or inspector, and you had a team of people, regularly, like every week, you would check up on outstanding mispairs and outstanding warrants, and you would chivvy up people. I see, because it was all entered to, in my day, it was all entered to a big logbook with a computer system now, that, you know, there'd been a warrant sent to me from the court because I was one of the case officers for the rest of so-and-so, so-and-so, and I'd made inquiries at his house and he wasn't there, and, you know, your sergeant, your inspector would say, well, what else have you done about it? You know, have you put out a broadcast for it? Have you put his name in the police review? Have you let other forces know? What investigations have you done in order to trace him? Because that warrant from the court is issued for the court for his arrest. And while he is at liberty, or she is at liberty, he is at liberty, and not been arrested, then it's like a ticking bomb in your pocket. And they're going to have to answer for why this man, who the warrant was just for a serious matter, it was not a trivial thing, it was for a serious matter. What investigations, what inquiries were done in order to track down Harrison Simpson before this, because it might have saved that wee lassie's life. And I think it's a timely reminder of some of these things, these old lessons. And I hope young officers are listening or watching this and think to themselves, if you get a warrant issued to you for the arrest of someone, you've dealt with it, then you've got to make every effort to execute that warrant and arrest that person.
And record the efforts.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Meticulously record everything you have done. Because come the great day, something like this happens.
Yes.
You're going to be called to
account. The day of reckoning. The wee girl was Isabel Rose Welsh, Tom. Alexandra Walker was her mother, and Harrison Simpson, who you've referred to, both who were jailed for life, whatever that means these days, I don't know. And it was a sustained campaign of violence. I'm not even going to read out the stuff I'm reading here, because it really is beyond a 2-year-old. There was actually sexual abuse involved as well. So the point I was going to make about this was that it takes us quite nicely onto a subject that we'd planned to talk about, but let's leave it until the start of the next episode next week. And that's to do with warrants as well, because I've got some good stories about warrants too, but this is to do with facial recognition, bringing us right up to date. We're talking about old cases. Well, here's facial recognition, how politicians are starting to get involved, and some of the stuff that's been in the press this week. But it's a subject that's going to come up time and time again. So we'll start off with that next time. And meantime, I'll see you tomorrow. We'll be talking about football and crime tomorrow. Right.
I'm looking forward to that. Now, just to say, funny, if you talk about facial recognition, I don't know if you had anybody that listened to Squad, but we had a guy who had a photographic memory for faces, and he was absolutely brilliant at recognising faces, and he was kept within the CID, within the old flying squad, serious crime squad set up, really because of that photographic memory. He was absolutely incredible. And you could be driving down the road and say, that's so-and-so, so-and-so. And he would say, and he's LP, local photograph, LP or SCRO. If there were minor criminals, it was LP, local photograph. If there were SCRO, that's so-and-so, so-and-so. And they would always know the middle. I know you're a great man for the middle names.
Yes,
You would always know their middle names. And Ronnie was a great guy. And honestly, he was absolutely amazing. And he spent all the latter part of his service in criminal intelligence. And I remember when he retired, I said to the head of CID at that time, "This is madness to let this guy go.
Yeah.
Why don't we take him on as a civilian member of staff? This guy's walking out the door with an encyclopedic knowledge of every criminal in Edinburgh. It's madness to let him go." So he was a human version of facial recognition.
I never worked with anybody like that, Tom, but I worked with a guy who had the same, but for registration numbers.
Yeah.
And he could tie the car to it. He'd say, "Well, that was a red Cavalier that we saw 2 weeks ago in Barhead. Reggie number, Sierra Golf, blah, blah, blah." He's just incredible. And what a tool it was. Absolutely. And it's all the same. It's that recognition of criminal activity. It was amazing that you can say that car was at that place. So what does that mean? You know what I mean? You've got it in two places at different times.
Yeah. I was quite good at that too as a young cop, because we used to, if you worked in the city, you would get a sheet and you came on duty and there'd be a memo with all the stolen cars on it, you know, and heaven forbid if a stolen car was found on your beat and you hadn't spotted it. And I worked with a guy who equally, he could spot a registered number that was out of sequence. I remember I was in one day in a car with him and we were behind the car. He says, "That number's not right in that car. Something wrong there." And so we pulled it over. And right enough, there was nothing criminal about it. What the fella had done is he'd had a new registration plate made up and he'd transposed the numbers. But
yes,
the guy I was with, he spotted something wrong. Right. That instinct, that just, as you say, that policeman's instinct. Wait a minute, something not right.
The only thing about any of all that surprises me, there were cars on the road back in your days on the beat.
Yeah, we had some. We had a few, as you'll remember, Simon, because you started your life on a horse, you know.
Tom, we'll leave it there. I think that we could go on all night, actually, because we've got so many things to chat about. But we'll do that soon, and I'll see you soon. Take care.
I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers, Tom. Good night.